Welcome to the lesson on revising your manuscript. We're going to talk about getting to the final version, and then we're going to talk about getting ready for submitting your paper. Let's start off by taking a look at where we are on our project management diagram. So we are finally getting to the closing part of the project. We've gone through initiating, planning, and executing, and now we're ready for closing. Let's take a look at the learning outcomes for this lesson. At the conclusion of this lesson, you will be able to revise your manuscript for structure, cohesion, and flow. That's looking at the overall manuscript. You will also revise each section of your manuscript, edit your writing for grammar, spelling, and style. You'll know what to do to write a cover letter for submission to the journal of choice, and you know how to prepare for the submission process. First, let me say congratulations that you've gotten to this stage. So if you're seeing this lesson and you've completed all the previous lessons, you have a full first draft. That's a big accomplishment, so congratulations. If you have time at this stage, what I would like you to do is just go away for a few weeks. Just let your manuscript sit. Sit in your computer, back it up, make sure you have a backup copy of it. But just don't read it, don't work on it, don't edit it. Don't even think about it if possible. Think about other aspects of what you need to do and just let it sit. Then when you come back to it, you'll have what we call fresh eyes. So you'll be able to read the paper with fresh eyes, and you're going to notice things that you didn't notice before. Now, sometimes you don't have time to step away. You need to keep working quickly, and that's okay too. I think it's better if you can take a break and then come back to it. But if you don't have time, you just don't have time. So you can keep working steadily. Now, when I say revising and editing, what do I mean? Let's take a look at some definitions of these two terms. Well, revising is when you are taking another look at your ideas, you're adding information, you're cutting information, you're moving sentences or paragraphs around, and you're making changes to make the writing more clear, accurate, interesting, or convincing. So what is editing? Editing is when you're adding or changing words. You're fixing problems with grammar, punctuation, sentence structure, and style. So revising is more high-level modifications to your paper, and editing is more at the technical and specific level on the paper. And in practice, you might be doing them simultaneously. I recommend in the course that you do the revising part first and then come back and do editing. And that's because it's going to be more efficient to revise first and then edit later. If you're editing at the same time that you're revising, you might lose track of the big picture. The overview, the looking out the airplane kind of view that you need to have when you're revising, because editing is pulling you down into the weeds, into the very specific details. Now, instead of concluding this week's lesson with an action list, the lesson is going to be an action list. There's not a lot of conceptual things for me to talk about today. It's mostly action. So we're going to go step by step, and you have a download in your course materials. That is a master checklist. We're going to look at a series of individual checklists, and that download is going to have all of those checklists on one piece of paper, and you can print that out and mark it off as you go. Okay, so let's get started. Action item number 1 is to start revising. And you're going to do this at the high-level overview first. So what I want you to do is sit down and read the entire draft. And as you're reading it, think about the content and the location of that content. In other words, notice all of the key elements, all of your logical arguments and conclusions, and where you have put those. Also, what I want you to do while you're doing this reading and noticing the content is to make a reverse outline. So get a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil and just start labeling it. Paragraph 1, paragraph 2, paragraph 3. And as you read that paragraph, write down what is the key message in that paragraph. And as you do this for the entire paper, it's going to help you see how you have structured your paper. You might feel like you already know how you structured the paper, but sometimes taking a look afterwards in reverse, doing a reverse outline, it's going to look different than your forward outline. And this will help you notice when you need to move big chunks of text or information to a different place within the manuscript. Okay, so let's start with the first checklist. This is the revisions checklist for your first pass overview revisions. And these prompts that you'll see are usually set up as a yes or no question. But I don't want you to just answer it yes or no. These are not literally yes or no questions. They're more prompts to get you to think about how you have written the paper and think about what changes you might need to make improvements on how you wrote the paper. So the first thing on the checklist is, are the paragraph contents consistent? Is there consistency between paragraphs and sections? So again, don't just say, oh yes, they are consistent. No, you need to think about it as you read it and think about whether there is that consistency within and between the paragraphs. The second point is, have you made the reader's job easy, or do they have to look up additional sources for information? So, that might apply especially to the materials and methods section, but just think about that in the entire paper. Is everything that you have stated correct? Is it factually correct? And you might need to verify. Sometimes if you're trying to write quickly, you'll just write something down from memory, and maybe you got a detail a little bit wrong. So this is a good time to do your fact checking. Verify that each reference you're citing actually says what you say it's saying. If your writing has factual errors in it, you're going to lose a ton of credibility with your readers. If you get one fact wrong in the introduction, they're going to question everything else you say for the rest of the paper. So make sure everything is correct. Next, ask yourself, is the manuscript cohesive between paragraphs and between sections? So this is a little bit different than consistent. Cohesive and consistent are not quite the same. Cohesive means, is there flow? Does one paragraph logically lead into the next paragraph? Or does it feel like it's jumping around all over the place? Ask yourself, does the writing clearly convey the ideas that are being presented? So is the writing clear? Is it understandable? Or do you need to revise some sentences so that clarity is improved? Ask yourself if the manuscript is complete. Did you miss something? Do you need to add some additional information to make it complete? How about the length? Can the manuscript be made more concise? Is it too wordy? Is it too long? How can you tighten it up and make it concise? Going back to the concept of consistency, what about your key terms? Are you using them the same way every time throughout the paper? When you have lists, are they structured in a parallel format? Are the words and phrases that you're choosing, are they precise? Or is there some room for interpretation there? Is there some ambiguity or some lack of detail? And also ask yourself, is this convincing? Are my arguments convincing? Will the readers believe what I'm saying and want to act on it? And if you feel like it's not convincing, well, how can you make it more convincing? Maybe that is looking up additional references that can be cited to make a stronger case for what you're trying to say. Maybe that means discussing some of the figures a bit more thoroughly. So whatever you need to do to make it more convincing, go ahead and do that during this revision stage. Okay, so that's the overview revisions. Now we're going to start looking at each section and revising each section more specifically. So this will be your second pass of revisions. And the introduction might need a lot of attention. That's normal at this stage, that the introduction is going to need more work than some of the other sections. Because now that you have written the discussion where you synthesized all of your results and you put it together with comparison and contrast to other previous studies. And so maybe when you go back and read the introduction, it's not really setting up for the discussion all that well. So if your introduction is no longer a really good setup for the discussion section, this is a good time to notice that, and you can make those changes in the introduction. So let's go through the checklists for each of the sections. Now we're going to start with the title. Ask yourself, does the title reflect the research question or purpose and its answer? Is the title concise, with no unnecessary words or phrases? Will the title compel readers to read the abstract? Does the title state the main topic of the study? Will selected keywords increase search engine hits beyond words in the title? Is the title clear and unambiguous? Have abbreviations been omitted except for common terms? Is the title complete? Does the title separate the article from other articles in the field? And you'll also need to submit with your journal article manuscript what they call a running title. And this is the short title that you'll see at the top of the second page, third page, and so on. And does that running title reflect the full title? Is it recognizable as a shorter version of that full title? Let's look at some prompts that are the checklist for revising the abstract. You want to ask yourself, is the research question or purpose stated? Is the approach stated? Are the key results stated? Is the research question or purpose answered? Are all of the elements signposted? Is the abstract within the word limit? Is the significance clear? Is the context clear? And does the abstract adequately summarize the paper? And one way to answer that would be to ask yourself, could a reader cite my paper just from reading the abstract? All right, how about the checklist for the introduction? And as I mentioned, the introduction might be a section that you have to revise more heavily than you have to revise the other sections. So here's your list of prompts. First, does the background funnel to the research question? Is it not a literature review? Remember, it should not be a literature review, it should be a background. Secondly, are references used when needed, and are they placed correctly within the sentence? So you don't automatically put the reference at the end of the sentence. Sometimes it's in the middle of the sentence. Also ask yourself, is the research question stated clearly and precisely? Do all of the components logically follow each other? Have all elements been clearly signposted? So again, it's important to let the readers know when you're giving them a key piece of information with signposting words or signaling words. Next, ask, is the approach mentioned in the final paragraph? Now again, this is optional, but I think it's a good idea to mention the approach in the final paragraph. Ask yourself, are the key results or conclusion mentioned in the final paragraph? Is the significance or implication stated clearly and precisely? Looking at the overall introduction, is it cohesive and coherent? In other words, are the paragraphs flowing from one to the next, or do they feel like they're jumping around all over the place? And does it make sense? Is it coherent? Is it too long or is it too short? Make sure it is a good length for papers in your field, in your discipline. Let's look at the checklist for materials and methods. So, are all the materials described correctly and with enough detail? So if you need to have the manufacturer, the chemical name, whatever biologicals you used, so on and so forth, do you have all of that detail included? Are all of the methods described correctly and with enough detail? So make sure that you look for typos in your methods. If you remember my story about the decimal place being off in a nutrient solution that caused a lot of problems for my student, you can see the importance of not having mistakes in the methods. And also make sure you have enough detail. So do you talk about the important conditions for doing this procedure, like the temperature, the pH, the volume, the concentrations of various chemicals? Have you used references when they're needed? And are the references placed correctly within the sentences? Have you organized the materials and methods section logically? So using logical subheadings and putting them in an order that makes sense to the readers. If you have any new or unusual procedures, have you stated the purpose for those? Is the section free of material from other sections? In other words, have you excluded any introduction or discussion or results from this materials and methods section? As we mentioned before, passive voice is preferred in the materials and methods section. So is the voice primarily passive voice? And did you use verb tenses correctly? It should be mostly past tense because you're describing things that you did in the past, but there might be sentences where you describe the way things are as an explanation for why you did certain procedures, and that might be in the present tense. And then lastly, ask yourself, are the word choices precise? Now let's look at the checklist for the results section. So what you want to do is ask yourself, is the results section organized in a specific way that makes a lot of sense? Such as from the most important results to the least important results. That's one way that you could go about it. And also within the paragraphs, how have you organized the paragraphs? Are they organized from the most important to the least important? When you have statistical data such as a p-value, is that information written such that it's supporting the data, but that p-value is not presented as the result itself? So it's supporting the result, it's not the result. Ask, have you directed the reader to figures and tables within a result rather than just announcing, go look at this figure or go look at this table, or announcing what's in the figure or table? So you want to do that skillfully and present the direction to the figure within a result. Ask yourself, are the results explained in enough detail? And have I included the control results, the positive controls and negative controls if you have those two types of controls? Is the section free of material from other sections? So does it have discussion material in it? That's the most common problem. You might have materials and methods material in the results section. So make sure that results is purely results. Check whether you have used the repeating pattern. If you're going to use this pattern, that is having the purpose, approach, result, and interpretation for each of the results. Are irrelevant statements and tangential information avoided? So are you keeping focused? Are you focusing entirely on describing the results? Are the references placed correctly and where needed? There's not going to be very many references in the results section, but you might have 3 or 4 scattered about. So make sure if you do have references, they are used properly. Are the most important results emphasized? So can the reader distinguish the most important results from minor results? And think about the tenses. Have you used tenses correctly? Again, in the results section, most of the tenses should be past tense. Only rarely will you use present tense in the results section. Now we get to the discussion checklist. So what are the questions you need to ask yourself about writing and revising the discussion section? Well, first ask, is the section well organized? Such as, from most important results to least important results. Are the results compared and contrasted with results of previously published studies? Now that is opposed to just mentioning the previous published studies and citing it without doing the work of comparing and contrasting and explaining how your research relates to those previous results. Think about, are discrepancies, unexpected findings, and limitations discussed? Is a conclusions paragraph at the end of the discussion, and is that paragraph not a summary? So again, conclusions and summary are not the same thing. You want to do conclusions, you don't want to do summary. Does the discussion follow a pyramid structure? Is the answer to the research question in the first paragraph? That's where it should be. Is the answer followed by supporting evidence? And that supporting evidence will be partially your own results, and partially it might come from some of the previous studies. Is the section free of material from other sections? In other words, have you excluded introduction material from the discussion? Have you excluded results material from the discussion? Is the significance of the work clearly discussed? And are the findings generalized to other use cases? So it is important to generalize your results in the discussion section. In other words, showing how the results that you found in your specific study can apply to other situations, other organisms, other locations, other diseases, whatever the case might be. And have you avoided repeating the results material And have you signposted all of the elements?